Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Spacian Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for February 2021. It's actually been a lot longer than I thought since my last update to my Spacian deck. I think we're actually coming up on 3 years in a couple months, so I felt an update was definitely due for the deck. It's been a while since we've gotten support for the deck, but I always like to keep this deck up to date, being one of my favorites. I would say behind Destiny Heroes, it's my second favorite Elemental Hero based deck, focusing on Contact Fusion and a bunch of other different fusion summons revolving around Elemental Hero Neos, your main go-to fusion component for the deck. I really like all the different plays we have. You can mix and match the different numbers of Spacians you run in the deck for a bunch of different preferred fusions. And I've said it before, and I would have thought by now, since it's now in the last update, we would have had an Air Neos reprint. So here's hoping this year we get that reprint. Maybe we'll see it in the Ghost Rare series coming up as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the monsters, we're running 2 Elemental Hero Neos. I normally start off with the playsets, but being one of the most important cards of the deck, I felt we start off with Neos, even though we're only running 2 copies of this card. It could be run at 3, but honestly, with just how easy it is to make use of this card for your different fusion summons and contact fusions and just summoning out this card, you only really need the 2. Other than that, it's basically your go-to fusion component, needing for almost all the cards in the extra deck and a good majority of your different contact fusions. So you run 2 of this and it can be easily summoned out with our next go-to card, which I also run 3 of, which is Neospace Connector. When this card is normal summon, you can special summon 1 Neospacian monster or Elemental Hero Neos from your hand or deck in defense position. You can tribute this card, then target 1 Neospacian monster or 1 Elemental Hero Neos in your graveyard and special summon it in defense. So this card just helps with the consistency of your plays revolving around Neos, being able to summon it back onto the field, or even just when you normal summon it, special summoning it, and then having your setup right then and there for all of your different plays. You can even bump this card down to 2 if you want to try your numbers with 3 Neos, but honestly, this card just brings this card out so quickly and then contribute to summon it from the graveyard that it's just that much easier to get it on the field to use. So I feel running 3 Neospace Connector and 2 Neos is plenty enough for those combos. For the Spacian lineup, I run 2 Spacian Grand Mole and 2 Spacian Dark Panther. These are my preferred 2-ofs in the deck, with all the other ones being single numbers, but they're the most important just because I feel they have the best monster effects, with Dark Panther being able to copy monster effects and Grand Mole being able to bounce cards. I even considered running Aqua Dolphin at 2. If you wanted to try the mix and match the numbers with this card, you can always try reducing some of the other numbers you run in the deck, but I feel this is plenty enough for the lineup, just having the Grand Mole at 2 and Dark Panther, since also a good number of fusions that you run in the extra deck revolve around these 2 cards, including our newest one, which is Elemental Hero Nebula Neos. For the other Neospacian monsters, like I said, we're running 1-ofs, but I did want to include all of the Neospacians. I feel like I go some deck profiles and I leave out Glow Moss or Flare Scara, but being able to go into all the different contact fusions depending on what you have, I feel it's necessary to at least run 1 of every copy. And even for some of the bigger contact fusions, just having more and more Neospacian targets to go into can definitely help for those plays, like Cosmo Neos, being able to have the option with more and more Neospacians on the field, and also making use of our trap card, which is next, to special summon a bunch of different ones and Neos out on the field to use. And then for some of the additional hero support, I wanted to stick to as close I could to a pure Neospacian deck, not having to rely too much on cards like Shadow Mist or Stratos, and just going full power with the Neospacian support. But for additional support, I do run 2 Honest Neos. I mean, it's got Neos on the card. It's just a good power boost card. Since I don't run Neospace, you have more options with some of your other cards in the deck for these cards, and just for some of the other fusions we go into. So being able to rely on this for the hit go-to power play can definitely come in handy for the summon. So just 2 of it though, I feel that's really all you need for your lineup. For some of the additional search power support, I run 3 Keeper of Dragon Magic. If this card's normal or special summon, you can discard 1 card to add 1 Polymerization normal spell or Fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. You can reveal 1 Fusion monster in your extra deck to special summon 1 of the fusion materials whose name is specifically listed on that monster from your graveyard in defense position. You can only use each effect of Keeper of Dragon Magic once per turn, and you cannot special summon from the extra deck except fusion monsters the turn you activate this. With the majority of the cards in our extra deck being fusion monsters, you're not really limited to any of your plays with this this card. I run 3 of it because it can also search out one of our main go-to fusion spells aside from polymerization, being Neos Fusion, which we heavily rely on for a bunch of different plays in this deck. So 3 of this can just help for resources, search power, you name it. And then for the last of the one-ofs, I run the 1 Rainbow Dragon. This, you obviously can't summon it out properly in the deck, but we can get out one of the powerhouse cards, being Rainbow Neos with this card. That much easier, just needing Elemental Hero Neos and Rainbow Dragon to summon this card out. And you really only need the 1-of for that play, since we can also rely on Neos Fusion to summon this card out, being the fact that you can summon from your extra deck using 2 monsters as material that include at least Elemental Hero Neos for the play. And then lastly, for the monsters in the main deck, I run 3 Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. If you wanted to run additional hero cards in the deck, including Elemental Hero Prisma, or even Elemental Hero Stratos, Shadow Mist, you name it, this can be your lineup spot if you didn't want to go the hand trap route in the deck. So just relying on this final spot for Ash Blossom, just as a more, if your opponent goes first kind of play, and you have options to stop some of their plays and search power. But other than that, like I said, if you want to go more of the hero warrior-based route, this can be the card to take out for those additional monster slots. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. One of the best spells in the deck is Neos Fusion. You special summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck that lists exactly 2 monsters as material, including Elemental Hero Neos, by sending those monsters from your hand, deck, or field, ignoring their summoning conditions. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters, and if a fusion monster you control that lists Elemental Hero Neos as material would be destroyed by a card effect or shuffled into the extra deck by its own effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So this will protect your contact fusion cards, but even if your opponent tries to destroy that card, it can protect it by banishing it. So this is why I prefer this card over Neospace. A lot of the times with some of the contact fusion cards, you can benefit even late game by contact fusing. You can't summon them because it has to be 2 cards, but having it in the graveyard to protect the card on your field by being shuffled back. But sometimes you want to benefit from the shuffle because you'll get additional effects that can either banish all cards in your opponent's field or shuffle or destroy them. So having Neospace on the field can kind of be a weakness to that play, where Neos Fusion, being the optional card to go into, doesn't have that restriction. And once again, if you wanted to run Neospace, I'll show what card you can take out for it, but I more prefer to keep this card in the deck as a whole. For more draw power in the deck, I also run 2 Convert Contact. If you control no monsters, you send 2 Neospacian monsters, 1 from your hand, 1 from your deck, into the graveyard to draw 2 cards. So this can get rid of, let's say pesky Neospacians that you really don't want to open up in your hand to use, and just having them in the graveyard to then special summon back with cards like Next can be all the better. So being able to give you draw power with Convert Contact can even help you to draw into more important cards like Neos Fusion into your hand. But I only run the 2 though. It is not a once per turn, but you have to control no monsters. And it does require you opening up some Neospacians, which is why I like running the number we have also for a good, consistency to at least have those cards to send off for this card. And I also run 2 Miracle Contact. You shuffle into the deck from your hand, field, or graveyard fusion materials that are listed on Elemental Hero Fusion monster that lists Neos as fusion material, then special summon that fusion monster, ignoring its summoning conditions. So just another way to basically contact fuse without having to actually contact fuse. A good amount of these cards, including Neos Fusion, Miracle Contact, can all rely on these plays without you having to actually get those monsters on the field. We do have cards in the deck that help rely on those plays, but these are definitely the preferred methods. And for the last of the one-of hero spells, I run 1 Miracle Fusion. With the Banish play, you have more options to go into, let's say, some of your generic hero fusions that we run in the deck. So very, very useful just to rely on, let's say, Absolute Zero or Gaia, using this card for the Banished. And since we're not limited with the extra monster zone anymore in the deck, we just have more and more space in our main monster zone to summon out extra deck monsters. I also run 2 Oversoul. This is going back to the fact that I do like to rely on some actual contact plays, just being able to summon Neos back onto the field and just be a monster that can either attack into my opponent or be used for the contact play, and not having a limiting destruction effect. If you wanted to drop it down to 1 Oversoul and put a Monster Reborn in, there's that option, so you can summon out other cards, but that's player preference also with that spot. And I also run 2 Fusion Deployment. You reveal one fusion monster in your extra deck and special summon from your hand or deck one of the fusion materials whose name is specifically listed on that card, and you cannot special summon from the extra deck except fusion monsters the turn you activate this card. So this is great with Neospace Connector, since Connector can get you out the one material for it, but I'll go over to the play at the end of the game, and then Fusion Deployment can also just give you that last monster you need. This can be potentially a 3 of. If you were to do so, you can drop the Oversoul down, or even just put in one Monster Reborn, putting the last of the Oversoul for the third Fusion Deployment, and then just taking out this card in general. But once again, player preference on that play if you won't choose to do so. And then I also run 2 Polymerization, more search power with Keeper of Dragon Magic, especially. This card's just that much easier to get into the hand, but we do run a good majority of cards in the extra set that aren't limited with contact fusing. Like I said, Absolute Zero and Gaia. We also have Neos Knight and also Brave Neos, just not requiring a actual contact fusion, but just must be fusion summoned. So Polymerization, Neos Fusion, all come in handy when summoning out those monsters. And then to finish off these spells, just the one reinforcement of the army. Most of the time with the search, I go into Neospace Connector. We are running 3 of, so just making it that much easier to open up this card into our hand with this 1 of in the deck. If you were to take out the Ash Blossoms and run the additional spot being Stratos or Elemental Hero Prisma, it could be another additional search for those cards. I don't run E-Emergency Call just because you really don't want to open up Neos in your hand, and there's not many other Elemental Heroes we're running in the deck. You want to either send them to the graveyard or be able to special summon them out with other cards to use on the field. Adding them to your hand with this deck doesn't really do much. And then that is it for the spells. For the traps, I run 3 next. You special summon any number of monsters with different names from your hand and or graveyard in defense position that are all Neospacian monsters or Elemental Hero Neos, but negate their effects. And as long as you control any of those special summon face-up monsters, you cannot special summon from the extra deck except fusion monsters. And you can activate 1 next per turn. And if you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. So this is the go-to card. If you set up plenty of cards with Miracle Contact, and then, or not Miracle, Convert Contact, having all those cards in the graveyard, you can then just activate next, special summoning them all back onto the field, and giving the cards you need for your contact fusion. This is the card I like to rely on for that play, like I spoke of before, just because it's easy for the special summon, and even though their effects are negated, it doesn't really matter. You're just going to contact fusion them away into your go-to fusion card. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 2 Elemental Hero Brave Neos. It needs an Elemental Hero monster, and obviously with the specifically being Neos, and 1 level 4 or lower effect monster being Neospace Connector for most of the time I use this card, or even just your Keeper of Dragon Magic. You must be fusion summoned. It gains 1 higher attack for each Neospacian and hero in your graveyard, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can add 1 spell or trap from your deck to your hand that specifically lists Elemental Hero Neos in its text. You can even go for next. Neos Fusion, Miracle, Contact, I believe doesn't have the option because it doesn't say Neos in it, so remember that. But just giving you plenty of options, and most of the time the search being Neos Fusion for this card. It's great for that power boost, and then just being an easy fusion to go into, even if we just use Polymerization. I also run the 1 Elemental Hero Gaia and 1 Absolute Zero. These are just my preferred ones to go into, with Grand Mole and Aqua Dolphin being targets for this card, and also just being easy fusion targets for Polymerization and Miracle Fusion. For the contact fusion plays, I run 1 Elemental Hero Dark Neos, 1 Flare Neos, 1 Grand Neos, and 1 Aqua Neos. I don't run Glow Neos. I prefer going into our next double contact fusion play instead of the actual Glow Neos. And as I said, Air Neos definitely needs a reprint. If I were to swap out any of these cards, you can mix and match all of these different numbers, or even just add in Glow Neos and Air Neos by taking out the Absolute Zero and Gaia for these spots. And then for the additional contact plays, I run 1 Elemental Hero Nebula Neos, 1 Storm Neos, and 1 Magma Neos. My favorite ones to go into. But once again, you can swap if you want to run Chaos Neos. That's another option with Glow Moss to go into for those plays. But having the option can be taken out by removing Storm Neos, since we don't have the Air Neos target. But you want to have all the hero options taken care of, with some of the best ones being Magma and Nebula Neos. But player preference can also come in if you were to take out Neos Knight, which I'm also running 1 of. Can be an additional spot for Chaos Neos, Glow Neos, or Air Neos. And I also run the 1 Rainbow Neos and the 1 Elemental Hero Cosmo Neos. Cosmo Neos relying on a good number of different Elemental Elemental Hero Neos and Spacians to summon out, but being a true boss monster at that, and the Rainbow Dragon play with Rainbow Neos. And as for the only Link monster, I run the 1 Vert Anaconda. This card might get hit in March for the ban list. If that does happen, you can always just swap this spot with another of the Spacian Fusion Elemental Hero monsters, Air Neos, Chaos Neos, Glow Neos. I spoke of all of them before. And then if you just wanted to go for the full fusion route, taking out the 1 Link monster for that spot. And then as for the go-to plays in the deck, relying on the fusion deployment and the Space connector, like I spoke of before, what you can do is you can summon out your Space connector, and then you can go for any of the fusion monsters that are specifically listed. Just remember, you'll need one of them for fusion deployment. Being able to then special summon out will go with Neos for this spot here. And then having these 2 cards on the field, you can then reveal with fusion deployment 1 fusion monster in your extra decks. You can go for, let's say, Grand Neos in this play, and then special summon one of those cards from your hand or deck onto the field that specifically list a card from that fusion play, summoning out your Grand Mole. And then you cannot special summon from the extra deck except for fusion monsters, so you're not really limited for that play. And then being able to then contact fuse with both of these cards shuffling back in to go into your Grand Neos with that play. The only bad thing is you'll leave the Space connector out on the field with no other play to go into. But then you have the contact fuse, like I spoke of before, limited to your fusion deck, so you can't even use the Space connector for link plays if you were to do that. But even just having the option to go into any of the different ones with the contact fuse, like I spoke of before, shuffling them back into the deck for that setup. If you go the Miracle Contact route, having the additional draw power, let's say you open up the next in your hand and have the Miracle Contact and the 1 additional Spacian in your hand, controlling no monsters, activate Miracle Contact, sending your Air Hummingbird, and then 1 additional card from your deck most of the time, depending on what Spacian you have. You'll want to go for the one that you can do the multiple contact use. If you get lucky enough and open up the Elemental Hero Neos in your hand, then you have the option with the draw power to then activate next, controlling no monsters being able to activate from your hand, special summon any number of monsters with different names from your hand and or graveyard in defense position, giving you the Neos, the Aqua Dolphin, and the Air Hummingbird on the field. Then being able to use all 3 of the cards to go into the preferred of the powerhouse contact fusion monsters. If you open up any of the other ones, it can even be the Grand Mole and the Neos and the Dark Panther play, and then going into Nebula Neos. Just depending on which ones you open up in your hand will determine which ones you want to send to the graveyard as well. And that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy it. I always love updating the Elemental Hero decks, and definitely has been a while since the Spacians needed an update. So glad I finally got around to it. I don't think we might have much affecting the extra deck aside from Vert Anaconda or any of the main deck for the plays. But if we do, I'll definitely look into updating it sometime after the ban list. If not, we'll see later down the road. Maybe we'll get some more Elemental Hero Spacian support. But until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.